UCS is saying 50,000. But it was like devastating what happened in Chernobyl. So here's the good news. In the light of Fukushima, the world's taken a time out on going full speed ahead with nuclear power. Germany, Switzerland, Italy, Spain, and Japan have announced their intention to phase out nuclear power. And Japan shut down all 54 now of its nuclear power plants, which we heard. And they have yet to have a blackout because the people are conserving energy and they're moving to wind. And people are puzzled, like, how could they shut down 54 nuclear power plants? They said it was like 30% or something. But apparently they were producing a lot of excess power that wasn't being used. You know, it was like, did I say, this wasn't said, I was skipping over, but I want to tell you that the radioactive waste lasts for 350,000 years. All of recorded history is 5,000 years. If that's not nuts to make one more ounce of it, when they don't know where to put it, you know, they try to bury it in a hole in the ground at Yucca Mountain, you can't figure out what's going to happen in 350,000 years. At the best advice right now is to keep it in above ground concrete casks where we can guard it. And maybe in 500 years we'll figure out something, you know, maybe string theory will find the seventh dimension and kick it up there or something, I don't know. But here's the really good news. Kuwait pulled out last month of a contract to build 4 reactors. Venezuela froze all its nuclear development projects. And Mexico canceled plans to build 10 reactors. This is after Fukushima. As far as abundant, sustainable energy, every 30 minutes, enough of the sun's energy reaches the Earth's surface to meet global energy demands for an entire year. Wind can satisfy the world's electricity needs 40 times over and meet all global energy demands 5 times over. The geothermal energy stored in the top 6 miles of the Earth's crust contains 50,000 times the energy of the world's known oil and gas resources. Tidal wave and small hydropower can also provide vast stores of energy everywhere. In 2009, the International Renewable Energy Agency was launched and now has 187 member states. Previously, we only had the International Atomic Energy Agency, then we had the International Energy Agency that was formed after the 1973 oil crisis to address global oil supply. But IRENA's mission is to empower developing countries with the ability to access the free energy of the sun, wind, etc. And since IRENA is the Greek word for peace, this new institution is especially well named. So we already have the technology to harness the bounty of the earth. It's clearly not beyond our financial means, but the corporate supporters of toxic fuel industries are working against the momentum to move to a green energy economy. They've been able to influence government policy to continue to subsidize polluting fossil, nuclear, and industrial biomass. Let's not forget about the awful story about ethanol and industrial biomass, because we are literally putting corn in our cars to drive them when people are starving. We're limiting our food supply. This is insane, to burn food. Anyway, the International Energy Agency estimates that the fossil fuel consumption subsidies worldwide amounted to $409 billion in 2010, up from $300 billion in 2009, 6 times more than the annual subsidies for renewables. And the IAEA figure doesn't count the $50 billion a year it's estimated goes to the Pentagon just to protect the oil tankers going back and forth, like the guard duty to bring in the oil. And there was another study that I had in a different version of this. The Scientific American did a whole analysis of nuclear subsidies, like it's been hundreds of billions of dollars since the beginning. I have the wrong copy of my report that I'm reading you. Oh, is that what it was? Yeah. And where is it? All right, well, oh, here it is. So they had this report. I love the name of it. The Gift That Keeps Giving, I think they call the report. It's a nuclear. And I want to finish up here, so let's see. The gift that keeps going. Okay, giving. And despite all, and then there are reports that have come out from Scientific American that we can be completely sustainable by 2030. They have a whole research report showing it. And they scenario contemplates building 3.8 million windmills, and it would take less than 50 kilometers of land, smaller than the area of Manhattan. And they say if that sounds like a big number, don't worry, because we manufacture 73 million cars and trucks every year, you know, so it's not impossible. Then the World Wildlife Fund also did a report, so did the UN. Climate change panel, they said 80% by 2050, but World Wildlife said 100%, and Scientific American said 100% by 2030. It's kind of like when Kennedy said we're going to put a man on the moon in 10 years. If we had the commitment, if we said we're going to do it by 2030, you know, and then we took all the subsidies and gave it to solar and wind, took it away from you, we would have it. And the question is, what keeps it, why aren't we having it? Well, these old dirty fuel industries, they don't want to lose their cash cow. Once the infrastructure is in, they can't sell the sun and the winds and the geothermal. They're going to lose that constant income that they have. You know, there's a lot of jobs and infrastructure, but it's not the same as selling oil all the time, you know, that's always being exhausted, or uranium or corn. So that's one of the reasons, and I love this quote about the forces of corporate forces from Franklin Delano Roosevelt, talking about how they were trying to run the country. And I just want to quote this 1936 Roosevelt: "We had to struggle with the old enemies of peace, business and financial monopoly, speculation, reckless banking, class antagonism, sectionalism, war profiteering. They had begun to consider the government of the United States as a mere appendage to their own affairs. We now know that government by organized money is just as dangerous as government by organized mob." That's our FDR. And finally, Joanna Macy, this eco-philosopher, describes this time as the great turning. We have to shift the energy paradigm. If we were to do that, we'd essentially be turning away from the industrial growth society to a life-sustaining civilization, foregoing this failed economic model which measures its performance in terms of ever-increasing corporate profits. In other words, by how fast materials can be extracted from the earth and turned into consumer products, weapons, and waste. Relying on the inexhaustible abundance of the sun, wind, tides for our energy needs, and ending our dependence on the old structures, beginning with transforming the way we meet our energy needs, we may finally be able to put an end to war as well.
Thank you. We have just a few minutes left for the workshop, actually 5 minutes, so we'd welcome any comments, questions. Yes.
Yeah, I lived in Baltimore in the 70s, and after 79, in 82 I became totally disabled, and I'm convinced that this low-level radiation is responsible for all these weird illnesses we're seeing now, chronic fatigue. I don't know if, or can't document if there's an escalation in the bone problems, but I suspect that all these knee operations and PEP operations and replacements, this and that, are because the marrow is being deteriorated. You know, and I think the best attack on this is to alert people to the health problems, because that makes it personal. And otherwise, you know, and people don't know it.
Well, I think it's not just nuclear, it's the chemical crap the genetically modified. I mean, they're just poisoning us, you know, and it's the same enemy, really. That's the good news, that we can really get together and focus on changing this corporate culture that's dominating us with nuclear power and chemicals.
Yeah.
all of that. You know, we now have all these autoimmune diseases. We've sort of conquered bacterial diseases with antibiotics.
But Lyme disease developed after Millstone had a very significant event in the 70s.
We think it was Plum Island.
It's
You think
actually
it was
been
Plum
linked to
Island?
the biological research lab there, which.
Or both?
Yeah, supports biological warfare.
It was right opposite where the Lyme disease started,
Yeah.
Plum Island in the Long Island Sound.
Are there any other comments or questions?
I just want to mention something that the public hasn't heard about. Among the reasons for not renewing nuclear plants.
Oh, wait a minute, would you stand here and turn around? Thank you.
Why isn't
Can I
there?
put that on you? Do you want me to aim that
Uh,
towards you?
Yeah, okay. Among the reasons not to renew nuclear plants, you mentioned that the pipes rust because there's this liquid running through them, and people can relate to that pipes rust. But what hasn't been explained to the public is that steel loses its strength in a radioactive environment.
Yes.
And,
Gets brittle.
and that's why it gets brittle. It doesn't get strong like steel ordinarily is. And that's a strong reason not to renew after 20 years. That's the original reason they had a 20-year limit.
40. That 40-year
40
license.
years, and then a 20-year renewal.
Oh, yeah, I'm
process.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
I think there've been pictures of pitted pipes where that has happened, and yet despite that, the plant has gotten its 20-year.
There was a move when the Yankee Row power plant was shut down. There were people who were calling for an autopsy, a metallurgic autopsy on the reactor vessel, and that was never done.
It was never done. Yeah.
There's, the other cover-up I didn't talk about. The Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty Organization monitors radiation all over the world to make sure nobody's cheating on nuclear testing. So after Fukushima, they were getting all the plumes that were flying over the planet. You know, we heard about lettuce in California, milk in Vermont, and we can't get the information. I'm on the board of the Lawyers Committee for Nuclear Policy. We filed a Freedom of Information Act, but the CTBTO is releasing it to governments, to the IAEA, to the WHO, but not to the public. So we should know where this radiation is going, because this is going on for years. It's
Some
not
of the radiation detectors in California, they happened to be shut off at the time of...
The EPA deliberately shut things down.
Well,
They don't want us to
Is
know.
there a monitoring network that the movement has set up?
No, that's not.
Can we
what-
do that?
Well,
They're
it's
doing it in
Need the
Japan.
little-
It's not easy to do. Greenpeace tested fish over 500 miles from Fukushima in the ocean, and they were radioactive. And
But-
it's been found to radioactive fish in Alaska,
Canada.
yeah.
But the Japanese women, the mothers, are setting up private dosimeters. They're buying because
That's
they're.
what I mean. Can't
But
we?
I don't know
Yes.
that we could. But
Well, it's possible. Chris Busby,
I think we should.
Dr. Chris Busby, low-level radiation campaign in the UK, he advocates citizen monitoring, and he has a whole program of how to do it
Who is
on the
it?
cheap,
Chris
on the
Busby.
website, llrc.org.
LLR.
He's a chief advocate of a citizen-based volunteer monitoring
Where are you from?
program.
I'm within probably 20 miles of Millstone
Oh.
in Norwich, Connecticut. And very concerned, because I had to move there. I didn't want to go there, but I'm there.
I work with Helen Colcott and all the Hampton celebrities, and we shut down the Brookhaven reactors. But we always talked about Millstone, Indian Point, and Oyster Creek, like New York's in the target of
Yeah.
New York
Are you in
City.
touch with Millstone people?
We were, yeah.
And
Were,
also,
not now?
there's 23 reactors in the United States, none of us talked about this, that are the same GE Mark I boiling water reactor as Fukushima. And that's what Ed Markey and others are saying. They have to be shut down immediately. All reactors. The same exact with that spent fuel pool up top. And actually earthquakes came through that Vermont area exactly, and went from Virginia all the way to Maine last summer.
But what
So-
we really have
yeah.
to do is promote sustainable